Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. Infamous NYC coming back with some more content for ESO Battlegrounds. As promised in my recent stream, I said I was going to be releasing a new Magicka DK build. Typically the one that you see me play on stream is my royalty build, which is my sword and shield light armor build. In that setup, I'm typically running Rattle Cage. Sometimes I'll wear 1 Kino, 1 Diamond House, but typically I'll rely on a Blood Spawn. With Burning Spellweaver in the back bar, and then I run 2 Desert Rose in the front bar for the extra mitigation. I ran that build for quite some time. You can see that build kind of tops out at just shy of 4k spell damage. Especially with the changes to Magicka DK Sustain, I decided I was going to come back and revamp what I would recommend running for Mag DK in no CP. Especially if you're playing in BGs. I'm primarily do a lot of BG streams. This was a good example of why I don't run Molten Whip. As you can see, the DK that I'm fighting here is utilizing Molten Whip, and then I'm fighting another Magicka Necromancer who's utilizing what's it called? Accelerating Drain, which is very broken. This patch does a lot of damage. So it's a 2v1. You can see I really get low. Had I been utilizing Molten, especially with how expensive coagulating blood is, I would not have been able to basically pull off this fight, because if you look back here, you'll see that I was already kind of low, and then I pop a pot because I see this guy was basically running away from me, and of course his buddy came along, and of course I knew that they were going to come for the 2v1, so I popped my pot a little bit early because I was kind of low on Magicka resources. I don't have a resto or a staff on the back bar. I basically rely on a pot, my ult, and my base regen. So I knew that they were going to come for the 2v1, and had I been utilizing Molten Whip, I would not have been able to sustain in this fight. And this is typically why I don't like Molten Whip. As you can see, I get really low. I get down to about 31%, which is close to execute range. Thankfully, I'm fighting 2 players who don't have an execute, and that power lash heal comes in really big. I get a small cauterize heal for about 2700, but it's really the Molten Whip heals that are coming off that are really helping me to sustain. End up getting a leap. That was a big leap. I ended up critting on the Magicka Necromancer for about 8700, and then he took about a 6800 leap, which got them both really low, and I was able to secure both kills. But that's really ended up blocking the leap. And then of course, as you can see, he's using Molten, and most of his healing is going to come either from Cauterize, which looks like he did not have up, and of course from Coagulating Blood. But Coag is very expensive, especially in no CP, where your max Magicka is typically around 30k, and if you look at even on live, it's fairly expensive. It's 3500, and it really doesn't heal all that well. It's a really shitty heal. It definitely needs a bit of a buff, especially for no CP, for how expensive it is. You see, and then I end up being able to secure the kill. You see, he tries to heal even at that low, right? I don't have Defile. I don't have any sort of major Defile. You'll see, even when his HP is that low, it looks like he's about 5% HP. And his HP goes like literally next to nowhere after taking the damage, because it really doesn't heal all that well. With that said, this is another light armor sword and shield build that we're going to go over. And like I said before, this is for no CP. On this particular setup, I am a Dunmer. I do recommend the Lover is going to give you the most amount of penetration. You can see the spell pen right here is coming in at 95-35 in no CP. All points into Magicka. For this particular setup, I do recommend running stage 4, running Vampire, because Drain is so broken. It deals, as you can see, the tooltip on Drain, it's much cheaper than running Fossilize. Either running Fossilize, I typically don't run Fossilize on Mag DK, I run Shattering, because you need every bit of healing. And you can see right there, Fossilize it's almost double. Right, Shattering is literally almost double the cost of Drain, and Drain is 12 meters, whereas Fossilize is 7. Drain does over the 3-second duration deals 15,000 damage for half of the cost of Shattering rocks. Even though you do get a heal, for some reason the heal feels broken in PvP, where it's like normally I get like a 2k heal, even though on this particular build, my Shattering Rocks should return like around 7,700. I never get anywhere near that much. I maybe get a 2k heal, maybe the most 3k if it crits. It feels like it doesn't work properly. So the benefit of running Shattering doesn't really outweigh, you know, what you're going to get from Invigorating Drain. Plus, Invigorating Drain is going to deal more damage, give you more range. Even though I am running a Gap Closer on this build, it's going to give you more range to CC your opponent from further away, almost double the length of Shattering Rocks for half the cost and more damage up front, and it heals you for more, and it gives you ultimate badge, which of course, you know, Mad DK DK class relies heavily on old gen for their sustain. Like I said, so jumping back into the beginning, so the Lover is going to give you the most amount of damage for your penetration via penetration, overrunning, for example, max spell damage. As you can see, my maximum spell damage here is actually higher with this build without relying on a proc, without relying on Burning Spellweave on the back bar. If you've played with Burning Spellweave, you notice very often when you run it on your back bar that typically it doesn't proc immediately, and you have to utilize 2 dots on your back bar. Typically, you're going to be using Engulfing, and then you're going to be relying on, for example, Talons, Burning Talons for that matter, so that you can try to get the proc from the burning proc. A lot of times it doesn't really go off, so you end up either turtling too long on your back bar or just saying fuck it and then just not even getting the buff, so you end up with a lot of downtime. I've played that build for several months now, and even though on paper it works out really well, but in actual practice it isn't the best setup to run. So with that said, we are switching up. DK doesn't have access to Minor Berserk. We're dropping Bloodspawn for this particular setup. If you feel that you have a hard time sustaining because your physical resistance is a little low, I also do recommend, I think, Nord. If you're willing to drop a little bit of damage, Nord is probably going to be your best bet for this particular build. And then you'll actually be going to be running this build as a dual wield setup versus a sword and shield setup. So you'll actually be able to make up the missing effective spell power by running this with an infused willpower sword for the extra 6% damage from the dual wield passive. And then in terms of switching it up, so you'll see your resistance, the resistance for this particular build will be just fine. You have 25-6, and then you also gain the benefit of not being rooted if someone is, for example, running an ice staff or from the chilled status effect, as there are people who play like ice wardens. And then of course you gain the extra stamina for blocking, CC breaking, dodge rolling, but then you also gain the extra ult gen, which of course DK benefits from via sustain. So you'll gain more sustain from the damage reduction because of rugged. You'll gain more sustain because you're going to heal less than having to rely on a sword and shield. Opens up running dual wield, which then you can utilize an infused on your front bar, which allows you to have 100% uptime on the weapon damage, and then switch off to a back bar or whatever, whether it's Magicka. I would probably put like a Magicka glyph to help sustain your Magicka, as you'll be able to heavy attack with your front bar to regen stamina, of course, via pot and ultimate. So for this particular setup, so I do recommend running Slime Crawl. You can see I'm running 2 pieces of Divines. Light. This is a light armor build, right? 2 heavy, 5 light. So we're running 2 pieces of Slime Claw with 2 Divines, and then we're running New Moon Acolyte with a reinforced on the chest piece. And I would probably recommend, if you can sustain, running a reinforced, because you'll gain the additional 1% versus the situational increase from running the extra critical resistance. Kind of works out either way, whichever you want to run, but I typically run 1 piece of reinforce, and it should always be your chest piece to gain the most from the value of it. This is 3 pieces of triglyphs on the large pieces, and then everything else is going to be max Magicka. Light armor with impen. In terms of the secondary set On my heavy armor DK, I was running the Akavari Dragon set for the sustain. With the changes to potentates, this is actually probably one of the best sets that you can run, especially for a Magicka DK, because it gives you the 5% player resistance. There's a lot of people running around using the two-handed ult, so at the very least you'll still have a 5% mitigation no matter what. If you're fighting against somebody, it's better than running like a one piece or running the additional bonus that you'll get from running like a what's it called, Bloodspawn, because that the Bloodspawn proc will be made up if you're going Nord. The Bloodspawn proc as well as the ult gen will be made up from being a Nord, and then you'll gain the extra benefit, the extra critical, as well as the extra flat benefit 8% from Minor Berserk. Like I said, it's 2 Moon, two Slime Crawl, 5 New Moon Acolyte. And it's a light armor setup, so you're going 2 heavy on the main pieces here, and then everything else should be light. And then we're running 3 pieces of Ring of Potentates with, of course, you're probably going to have to swap it over to Arcane, and then that's all spell damage. Right, so we're running 3 spell damage, and then 2 willpower on the front, with a shot glyph Nirnhone in your main hand, and then your offhand should be the weapon glyph infused, so that you have 100% uptime. 100% uptime on this particular setup. So if you're running Nord, you see you'll sit a little bit lower, and if you're running Dark Elf, which I think a lot of people, most people are running Dark Elf, you're going to end up swapping to Sword and Shield. If you're running this on a Nord build, you're going to end up swapping to a dual wield to be able to eke out the extra damage, and then you'll be able to situationally block on your front bar anyway. In terms of the back bar, I am running an infused Resto Staff, and that's primarily for heavy attacking to regen when you get really low, as you're not really running very high recoveries, as I typically don't. Of course, this recovery is with a pot. Because we're running Vamp, you're not going to have any sort of health recovery. You can see my stats here. Again, this is a no CP in 22, 29k Magicka with almost 15.5 in terms of your stamina. And of course, I'm running Tri-Stat Food. I typically run Tri-Stat Food. So for this particular build, I do recommend running a Gap Closer, especially because there are a lot of Magicka sorts, so it allows you to get in close, especially because we're utilizing a Devouring Swarm. So this allows you to basically Gap Colos into groups, and then utilize things like Draw Essence into a Devouring Swarm, and you're going to deal a large amount of AoE damage. You can see the tooltip on the whip is 8778. The Power Lash is coming in at just about 10.4, and then you can see the Draw Essence there. I typically would not recommend spamming Draw Essence because you need to wait for the secondary explosion to take advantage of the 10% return of Magicka per opponent. I don't recommend using in a 1v1, as you'll be able to deal enough damage between, you know, Empower into a CC into a double whip, and then utilize Devouring Swarm or whatever ultimate. I do recommend Devouring Swarm, as it has a huge tooltip for a very low ult cost, especially because the 3-piece on Potentates reduces ult cost by 15%. And of course, as a stage 4 vampire, Devouring Swarm also gets reduced on top of that. But when you actually utilize the ult, it actually gives you the full amount as if there is no reduction, right? And you can see even on Shifting Standard that normally has a 225 ult cost because of Potentates is 192. But when you utilize in terms of Battle Roar management, in terms of the resource return that you get from Battle Roar, it actually gives you the full amount. They changed that a while back, so even if you use cost reduction on ultimates, it gives you back the flat base amount in terms of the resources. That's why I went this route. Draw Essence typically is going to be a really good heal. When you have at least 2 or more opponents around you, and wait for that secondary explosion to gain back. Of course, for the damage, you can see there it's 6,800. After 2 seconds, it deals AoE damage, and it returns 10% of the cost of the ability per opponent. So if you have, you know, multiple opponents, you can return up to 1,200. If you have, like, if you're in the middle of a whole team, you're going to return back 40% of the cost of this ability, and you're going to deal a large amount of AoE damage. Like I said before, Invigorating Drain is going to be your CC of choice because everything I stated earlier on in the video. Inner Light for the extra max Magicka as well as the spell critical, and then your front bar is going to be Devouring Swarm. As you can see, it's 10 meters, so it's very large for 10 meters. It lasts 7 seconds. The tooltip is 5268, so this literally deals 35,000 damage on a no CP build, and of course it heals you for 2833 health for each enemy that you hit over the course of 7 seconds. So it's going to provide you with a lot of HP sustain from Devouring Swarm, as well as Draw Essence when you're going to be able to pull in. It now has an unlimited number of opponents that you can draw from, and so if you have 10 people around you and you're utilizing both of these, it's going to give you a lot of HP sustain, and during bats you can basically Invig Drain all over again, and while your bats is going and while you're waiting for your secondary explosion, you're going to sit there and pop Invigorating Drain and basically be regenning a lot of ultimate while you're utilizing your ultimate. Back bar, of course, is degen for major sorcery. It gives you a nice dot. You can see that it's 15k over 12 seconds. On this particular build, we are using Race Against Time. Race Against Time for obvious reasons, for the immunity to snares and roots, but more importantly for the minor force, because we are running a good amount of spell critical percent chance, so that gives us an additional 10% on our critical damage. I chose Dragonfire Scales is really going to be your best bet when you're in your Devouring Swarm. Be sure to pop, as you can see the tooltip there is 6800, and it can proc every half second. So if there are other people who are around you that are from range and they're hitting you with range, one, it reduces the damage that you're taking by 50%, and then it reflects 6800 damage every half second. This is a really good ability to utilize. And then of course Cauterize is going to be your other form of healing, and then of course Volatile Armor, and then you have a secondary. You can use whatever you want on your back bar, whether it's Shifting Standard for group play, or you can turn around and utilize, for example, Magma Shell, which is really good for group play if you want to give everybody a damage shield. Either maybe your team gets ulti dumped and it gives you the tankiness that you need as a DK, and then of course it gives everybody a 50%, it gives everybody a shield for 50% of their HP. So for example, you can take a look at my HP. It's 22k. So if someone were to pop Magma Shell, that would give me an 11k damage shield for 10 seconds. It's a really good defensive ultimate. So it's really up to you what you want to run on the back bar. You could run Sigil Order for the additional 8% when you're on your back bar. It's entirely up to you. Don't think I left anything else out for this particular build. I think I kind of went over everything. So I've basically got all of the pieces I already crafted. I just need to transmute my one of my willpowers, and then I'm deciding on whether or not I want to reroll my character, or not reroll, but race change to Nord, or keep him. If you want to take a look at what this would look like on a Dunmer, like I said before, it will be, you will have to run Sword and Shield. Alright, so going back to willpower, sword and shield, and I recommend Nernhoned if you want to spend the extra, as it will give you slightly more resistance, which is not all that much, entirely up to you. But obviously Nernhoned is your best. If you have a reinforced, by all means stick with reinforced. And then I think the only thing that you have to swap out to, I think that was it. Yeah, I think in terms of oh, that's what it was. So you'd have to run, and then you'd have to run your glyph on the back bar. All right, so you'd lose a little bit of sustain because you have to run your glyph on the back bar, but you'll gain an additional like 250 or 300. In terms of the overall effectiveness of the build, it goes up by about 350, but you gain an additional like 250 spell damage or 300. Like I said, it's entirely up to you. You can opt this way. You have the ability to block on your front bar and then utilize heavy restos. Also, the heavy resto is one for the region and as well as major mending. Right, so this gives you access whenever you heavy attack with a resto staff. It gives you major mending. I believe it is 3 seconds of major mending. Yeah, it says you gain major mending for 3 seconds after completing a fully charged heavy attack, increasing your healing by 25%. So that's basically why I would go Resto, so that you could basically heavy Resto staff right before you go into an ult and gain the additional healing from, as you can see right there, that the major mending heal goes up to 3091. And of course you're going to want everything in here. You're going to want all the passives. Right? And then you can see the healing goes up to 125%. It deals 3400 damage, so that's a pretty good amount. You're going to heal for 125% of the damage, so you're going to gain an additional 25%. So that's whatever the damage is going to be 34, and then it's going to be cut in half, so it's going to be about 17. So you're going to heal for like about 2k, maybe 2100 per person. So it's a pretty decent heal for the cost. That's why I said I don't recommend utilizing it so much in a 1v1, but if you're surrounded by multiple opponents, this is basically going to be your heal when your Power Lash is on cooldown. And then of course while you're in your bats, make sure while your bats is running, immediately hit Draw Essence and go right into an Invig, so that you're regenerating your HP and your ultimate. And then of course make sure that Dragonfire scales is up. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If this is your first time watching the video, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on future content. And if you enjoy the content, be sure to hit the like button so that the video gets recommended to other people. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless.